Greetings. I am Tom Earl. I know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy, it means the world to me. I hope you know that in this moment you are valued, you are loved, and you are appreciated just as you are. My friends, I have a new series for you. This is called the Listening Deeper or the Re-Listen series. You can call it either one. I know I am. Now, you may have heard this intro before. We are using the same intro for this series. So have no fear if you're listening to this again and thinking, oh, I've heard this episode before. Don't worry. Same great intro. Absolutely amazing new podcast. So feel free to hit the skip 30 seconds if you've heard this before. But if this is your first time hearing this, welcome, my friends. What we are presenting to you over these next episodes is really some deeper listenings or some re-listens to some of our most requested, some of our most listened to, some of my favorite episodes that we've done. Now, we have put out over 300 episodes since this has started. That means all the way back to 2016, I've put out one episode a week, every single week without fail since 2016. That means there's a lot of really awesome interviews, solo episodes. There's some really great things in there that you probably haven't heard if you're just joining us, or even if you're a longtime listener. So what I want to do is pull together a number of my favorite ones and your favorite ones that you have listened to or that have been listened to before you. And I want you to either hear them fresh for the first time or give them a re-listen yourself. I'm telling you, I have re-listened to each of these and really just thinking about where I was in my life then or the wisdom from then that applies to now, because some of these are going to be from 2016. Some are going to be from last year. Some of them are going to be, weeks before everything that went down in 2020. So I want to share these with you as a gift going into the time vault of our episodes. And really, I invite you to go through these with new ears, with new hearts, because we are new people here in this moment. Now, I invite you to let me know if you listen to it, what year do you think this week's episode was from? And I'd love to hear your thoughts, my friends. I look forward to sharing this Listening Deeper as we re-listen series with you. Let us jump into this week's re-listen. Here we go. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the celebration. As you know, this is my year of courage. I know you could be anywhere. So the fact that you are here today sharing your greatest gifts, your time and your attention means the absolute world to me. Oh my goodness. I am so excited and hyped. I could barely sleep last night. I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to sleep through my alarms. I set 300 of them. Because we have someone, I just have been consuming her anything on YouTube or podcast and just loving it. She goes by the name of Cy Wakeman. How's it going, Cy?
It's going awesome. I'm so glad to be with you.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad I recorded that. I'm gonna have that as my wake-up alarm.
That would be a riot. I should have thought of something even cooler to say. Tom, this is Cy. It's time to get up and enter into the world and do good things.
There it is. Do you mind if I give folks a little introduction to the awesome work that you're doing in the world?
Please do. Please do.
Okay, so Cy Wakeman is a drama researcher, international leadership speaker, and consultant. In 2011, she founded Reality-Based Leadership. She's the author of 3 books: Reality-Based Leadership, The Reality-Based Rules, and No Ego. In 2017, she was named as one of the top 30 global leadership gurus by Global Gurus, a top 100 leadership expert to follow on Twitter, and was deemed the secret weapon to restoring sanity in the workplace. She lives in Waterloo, Nebraska, and is the official alarm clock for Tom Earl. Feel free to add that in if you'd like for all your.
I love that. I'm changing my bio. I'll make a note right now.
That's quite a wonderful bio. you
Well,
know?
thank you. Thank you. Just a side note, I have 8 sons, so I am an alarm clock in many people's lives.
8? You have 8?
Yeah, I have 8 sons, so
That makes sense because I was listening to one of your podcasts, which is amazing. Folks should listen to it. It's called No Ego. And you were talking about the metaphor of the Batman
yeah.
with conflict mediation. But then another one, you were talking about, I think, like your son being 16. And I was like, what happened? Did I like jump a couple years?
Yeah, exactly. No, we just have a broad spectrum of right now they're 14 through 26. So we're a blended family. So I brought 4 boys into the marriage. And then I always tell people you've got to be very careful on Match.com because I got 4 more boys on Match.com. So,
Well, I recently just got engaged and I met my partner on online dating too.
oh,
So
cool. Congratulations.
thank you. I appreciate that. So your tagline is ditch the drama and the entitlement. That's how you start off your podcast.
Yeah.
Ditch the drama and the entitlement. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a drama researcher, and I noticed early on in work, at least, that there was so much time wasted in unproductive thought processes and disruptive behavior and things that were really coming out of this ego mindset. And I also noticed that everyone was working hard to create a workplace to engage others, but engagement without accountability on their behalf created entitlement. And so it just seemed like a lot of people had gotten confused about what's my responsibility and what's the workplace's responsibility, and how do we come together and really do great things. And so I started life out as a therapist, and
Woohoo!
I know, noticed that there are so many ways people think and behaviors people get into that hinder themselves from what they want. And then there's other things that they could do that would really help themselves and others. And to me, it was just so clear that suffering is just completely optional, and that so much of our suffering is self-imposed, and it has so much to do with the lens in which we're seeing the world. And I really felt like I could make a difference, just helping people understand that drama doesn't have to be a fact of life, that we can really live drama free.
So much in there to unpack and discover. So awesome. It's like I'm sitting down to an awesome feast. I'm like, yes, where should I start?
Go ahead. I love it. I love it.
First of all, my mom celebrated like her 35th year of being a social worker. So I always.
Oh, awesome. That's my background. I was a social worker turned therapist. We're good people.
I agree. So a couple things in there. Let's go through it chronologically of how you introduced it. Let's start with, I hear you say that a lot, the engagement without accountability equals entitlement.
Yeah.
For some folks who maybe aren't involved in HR or have context for that lingo, what is engagement in this example or in the way you're using it?
Sure. So engagement is something that in HR and leadership at work we started to focus on, because the theory is if we can all work together to create environments that make it easy to plug and play, that really facilitate people being able to really bring their best work, why wouldn't we, right? Why wouldn't we want to make environments that were conducive to good work and not hindering? And so what happened in the world of work is everybody really thought that was a great idea, and then they over-rotated to engagement. So they got the idea that it's the organization's responsibility to make it easy and wonderful to have this environment to work in. But we over-rotated and left out people's own personal accountability in that. And so a lot of folks would start to think, if I'm in pain at work, it's my organization's fault. And so people did not keep their shared accountability up. And when I study people and their states of accountability, people that are high in accountability, when they're in pain, they self-reflect and they go, what's my part in this? How can I see the world differently? How can I evolve? Where can I grow next? And then what's left over, they go, and here's where the organization could help me. People that are in lower states of accountability feel pain and they go, Yeah, the problem is my organization.
Mm.
So when we started to talk about engagement, we over rotated. And so if you have all the organizations and all these things to work to engage folks, but we're not also calling people up to greatness and asking them to be accountable, it will start to result in entitlement, where if I am not happy or engaged, it's my circumstances. And that, when I started to see it at work, took me right back to when I was a therapist. I would work with people that had chosen to couple up. And a lot of my clientele at one time were couples. And couples would come in for some assistance. And I would ask them, what's going on? And first thing I noticed as a trend, they always wanted to talk about what they fought about.
Mm.
And so part of my role as a therapist, and I think part of anyone's role as a leader, is to manage the energy away from why we can't to what do you want to create and how we could. So I have a different perspective on leadership. I think leaders manage energy, not people. I think people can manage themselves. They're pretty independent. So when people would come in, they'd want to talk about what they thought about. And I would say, well, wait a minute, what do you want to create? Like, what are your goals here? And I noticed a pattern. Most people that were sitting in my office wanted the same things. They wanted more happiness and they wanted more success. And success, not just I want a good career and make money. Like success, if together they wanted to be good recyclers, then it was like the reason that people get together as couples is they have this belief that together we can do more or be more than we would be on our own in the world, right? I think that's a key reason for those of us that choose that. That's why we choose it. And they also wanted more happiness. And so I'm like, success and happiness, that's what we want in life. That's what we all want at work. Why would we go to work if we didn't want success or happiness? So I would ask people then, if that's all you want, like, what's the issue? Because when you think about success or happiness, as long as we've had the human race, people have been speaking about and writing about how to be successful and happy. Every philosophy, spirituality, religion, even cave petroglyphs, right, talked about happiness and success. So I would say, that's easy. There's just these rules of life, these universal principles. But before I teach you those, what have you tried? And people would say, I believe to be happy or successful, I would need a different fill in the blank. Like, I would need a different partner, or I would need my partner to act differently, or I would need a different boss, or a different job, or more money, or live in a different place. And what I noticed with people who were off track in the moment from success and happiness is they'd come to believe that their circumstances were the reasons they couldn't succeed. And your circumstances aren't the reasons you can't succeed or be happy. They're the reality in which you must be happy.
Can we run that back?
Yeah. So a lot of people come to believe that if only my circumstances were different, I would be happy or successful. And they get to thinking that my circumstances are the reasons I can't succeed or I can't be happy. But the reality is that it's not your circumstances that are the reason. Your circumstances aren't the reasons you can't succeed. They're the reality in which you must succeed. And by changing this mindset, you change almost every question and you really change yourself and others. So I happen to be married, and my husband's name is Richard. And when I focus on, I would be happy if Richard weren't so dang detail oriented and would quit interrupting me for more details, I would really, be very happy here. But when I change the fact to my reality, given that I'm in love with a man who likes detail, I can anticipate some questions. My happiness level changed instantly, as did my approach. He didn't have to change. And that is a profound awakening for most people. So when I say engagement, how reality is, without accountability creates entitlement, is I get more and more disgruntled when things aren't going my way according to my preference, and my happiness wanes. But if I were engaged and accountable, I would say, given the fact I chose to marry someone who likes detail, what could I change in my approach to still tell my story and keep track of my thoughts when he maybe interrupts with a question? Doesn't change my reality, but by taking that accountability totally changes my experience of my reality. And Richard didn't have to change at all.
What's the difference in the way you're using the words between accountability and responsibility or personal responsibility?
I'm not sure they're that far off, but accountability is really based on self-reflection,
Mm.
and responsibility seems to be based more on um, a loyalty or something I committed to. So responsibility seems to more move into action, where accountability is more the thought process. But what I tell people is, if you look at the word accountability, it's just the ability to account for how I got here.
Mm.
And then responsibility is the ability to respond differently. So before I can respond differently, I've got to really account for how I got here. And if my accounting for how I got here is he didn't, he did, the world didn't, the world did, I didn't have enough time, I didn't have enough money, there's really nothing I can change in there. But if my accounting for is I didn't set priorities to match my values,
Mm-hmm.
then there's a lot to change. So if I'm thinking I didn't have enough time, the universe didn't give me enough time, there's nothing to change. And so that's why self-reflection really is the first step to freedom.
Mm.
Because if you can, like, get onto yourself and what you do and how you do it, you can respond differently. And to me, that's the ultimate freedom, is that every moment I can just change who I am by changing how I think and what I do.
Mm. It reminds me of in the diversity and inclusion and equity space. That's where I came up in. Is that a lot of people want to stay in the Kumbaya team builder work, which is
Yeah.
necessary to start off, build relationships, and don't want to move into the, now let's talk about my role in systemic oppression or my role in privilege and power. They want to stay in that feel good. Is that kind of what you mean by engagement without accountability?
You got it. You got it. So yeah, it's that feel good kumbaya. I love where you went with that, because um, the ego is so vested in not being outed and not
Mm.
having any role of this and being the victim. And so I've just been so grateful about so much of the turmoil going on right now in our country,
Mm.
which sounds ironic. Now, do I wish we were born enlightened and we didn't have to teach any of this? Absolutely. But I've really, noticed for myself the times where I've had to self-reflect on my privilege and
Mm.
self-reflect on, as people teach me more about just the concept of intersections and
Mhm.
um, just all the incredible combinations we can be. And that's been painful at times, because I find that the more I know, the less I know. And it's not comfortable being in beginner's mind.
Mm.
And so, even as a therapist, like, we were taught the basics that, gender identity is different than sexual orientation is different than, and just how, much of a spectrum we all live on, and we move along that spectrum. And
Mhm.
having that intellectual knowledge is very different than letting my ego go and really trying to understand a world that I haven't yet personally experienced. And so I
Mm.
think it's exactly like that. It's getting beyond the kumbaya into where I'm going with this. Is I remember the first time that somebody brought up the topic of privilege,
Mm.
and I chose to self reflect on that for 30 days straight, and to every day identify how I was privileged, because I knew how I wasn't privileged, right? I'm first time college grad in my family, and just, as identifying as a female. And I knew how I wasn't privileged. My ego kept track of that.
Mm.
But my ego didn't keep track of how I was privileged. And so I had to get into self-reflection beyond ego and really take a look at how I am incredibly privileged.
Yeah.
And I would just identify a couple of ways every single day. And that grew my compassion for others, definitely. But it also grew my own humility that so much of my life didn't happen because I'm so smart and I'm so clever and I work so hard. That a lot of things have happened in my life because I um, didn't show up in a package that offended people before they could know my value.
Mm.
And a lot of people, I'm not talking about their package they show up in. I'm talking about how some people's packages um, chafe the ego quicker than other people's packages,
Mm.
right? So, like, if one of my dear friends showed up and just the way that he dresses, his name is Jeff, and the way that he responds in the world is not predictable for what he looks like, right? So he looks more, if we can, it's stereotyping, but he looks like what somebody would say is more male-like, but he doesn't show up that way.
Mm.
Well, before you can even get to the gifts he brings to the table, he has chafed so many egos because egos like to know. And
Mm.
if you show up and you represent something I don't know,
Mm.
then I've got to decide about you and story about you and I got to figure you out and put you in a box. So the ego hates the idea of intersection because there's just so much not to know. And
Mm.
when you don't know, and there's this unknown, the ego's very uncomfortable. And a lot of us haven't practiced just being in the state of, how would I know? Why
Mm.
don't we continue to experience each other and we'll learn more? And that's when you get past the kumbaya. To get past kumbaya, you've got to get past ego. And to get past ego, you've got to have accountability, because accountability is death to the ego. That's a lot, but did that make any sense at all?
It made absolute sense. Do you do any free opt-ins or free downloads or anything like that, or free giveaways ever?
Awesome. All the time. Yeah.
What's one of them?
So some of our free, actually, I'll tell you, we give everything away for free
Okay.
because we believe the world's abundant. So if you go to my YouTube channel at Cy Wakeman, we have so much content out there completely for free. We have, we just really believe in, we even tape our keynotes and give them away for free. But what I'm glad to give away, if you are wanting to do something, is I'm glad to give away a copy of each of my books to somebody.
Here's the contest. Is I want y'all now to go on Instagram stories or Instagram or anything like that. And Cy has so many quotable moments. So your favorite quote from anything that's happened at this moment, or by the time we end, that you hear Cy say, post it on your favorite social
That's cool.
and tag both of us. And then we'll do a random drawing of however many books Cy is going to give away to folks who do it, because there's so many moments where I'm like, ooh, I want that on a shirt. Oh, I want that on my wall. Like, so many good quotable moments.
I love it. And I'll give you 10 books that you can give away. So
I appreciate that.
I'll give you that. And in
y'all.
fact, if you're talking about shirts, we'll also throw in, we've got a shirt that says your ego's not your amigo.
Oh my gosh.
So we'll do a shirt giveaway too.
Oh, look you're so generous.
No
I
worries.
appreciate that. So, when you were talking about privilege and that quickly saying for 30 days, I'm going to reflect upon my privilege. I'm having flashbacks of times where I've worked with teachers or, different people, and I've went through a privilege workshop, and the person who's supposed to give me a ride back to the airport refused to give me a ride back to the airport. So, I would say that's one of the, if not the hardest subject. People will talk about racism, and they'll talk about sexism, and they'll talk about homophobia, but they don't want to talk about white supremacy, patriarchy, and heterosexism, because that's the accountability. That's me. That's my role. It's not this thing out there.
Yeah, see, if I'm talking about this thing out there, my ego is like, yeah, I'm one of the good guys.
Exactly.
I'm one of the good girls. I've never been, and I even realized in my own journey, like I grew up in a little tiny town in Belmont, Iowa, and I would say, I don't think I'm a racist because I'm naive. I've just never been around anybody of color. And I realize how naive that statement is
Mm.
because the fact that I hadn't been around many people that had different shades of brownness, um, and my naivete showed that I would stare in public or I would ask dumb questions and that waking up, my ego got so bruised. And I'm not saying I'm at all awake. I'm saying I'm committed to on the daily trying to go deeper into this. But
Mm.
I talk to people a lot too. We did this really quick exercise and I was just waiting to go on stage as a speaker, and they're like, at your table, just identify one or two ways that you're privileged. And no one at my table could identify the fact that they're
Mhm.
privileged. Everyone had an iPhone X sitting around. Everybody had um, like college degrees. Everyone like had enough food that day. Like no one had, it
Was
was
they
just
were
like,
at a conference?
yeah, they were at a conference that some boss sponsored them to go to, and I was just like, so for me, and I know they seem so shallow to your listeners, but like
They
they
don't.
weren't even getting there. I was like, and
Mhm.
I'm not that girl who's like, oh, I know about this, but I felt compassion in that moment about what many people have to face as ignorance every single day. And I don't know how people don't just punch others in the face sometimes. Like, I know that, I mean, my skin's kind of brown, and I think I was just born this way because I think the universe knew that if I were a little bit browner, I literally would punch people in the face. And I want to be nicer than that. So I think my package came knowing my limitations.
Mm. My continuation on that is, how do you get yourself or others there quickly where they can have that accountability, be empowered by their self-reflection rather than resisting through with the ego? How do you do that yourself or others?
Yeah. So I need to explain just a tiny bit on like really general how the mind works so that people can get this. So your mind is binary. You have the part of you that's pretty primal and in ego. And then you have another part of your brain that's the inner hemisphere that's collaborative and accountable and self reflective, all by kind of nature. And what happens is that you can't be in both conditions at the same time. It's
Mm.
mutually exclusive. And it's like we all have a toggle switch on our forehead. We all are capable of both. I really believe this. But most of us, when we're toggled down, we're seeing the world through the lens of the ego. And the ego distorts our reality. It
Mm.
color commentates. We see somebody walks by and doesn't say hello. And our ego narrates that's because they think they're all that in a bag of chips since they got their promotion and they're rude. Like the ego fills in the blank with distorted information. And the ego really likes to eat insult for lunch and it likes
Mm.
to know things and be certain. And the ego usually paints us as kind of like ourselves as like the victim. And we can only see where we've been done wrong. And then there's another part of our brain, which is this inner hemisphere, which is really open to the possibilities, open minded, collaborative, innovative, um, not in scarcity, kind of in abundance. And this toggle switch I talk about is like on your forehead that you're either in ego or in self reflection, but not at the same time.
Mm.
So the ego loves to vent, and venting's the ego's way of avoiding self reflection. And self reflection fuels accountability, which is death to the ego. So when we're talking about diversity, a lot of people can opinionate, which is just venting about those people over there and what they do and what people did, 50 years ago. And they can really commentate about all of that with judgment. The ego judges. So that's the kumbaya stuff. But to get people into self or into the better part of their brain, as long as their toggle switched down, anything you say to them is just going to punch the ego in the face.
Mm.
Anything you try and teach them, you're like, but look at the history and look at like, just see it from my side. As long as somebody's toggle switched down, they can't see it through anything but their own ego.
Mm.
So to work with people while their toggle switched down is really it's not going to be fruitful.
Mm.
So what you want to do is be able to learn the art of toggle switching people up. So there's low self and high self, same person. And to toggle switch people up, you want to bypass the ego, right? You don't necessarily want to engage the ego or ignite it. So a great way to do that is through an ego bypass that we teach in leadership, are questions for self-reflection. And to do that, you usually have to let the ego off the hook. So I might say, gosh, we're going to look at privilege in each of our lives today. And it's been my experience that people don't necessarily know their own privilege. Now I'm letting the ego off the hook, but don't take my word for it. Why don't you check it out for yourself?
Mm.
And so here's a question. Are there some ways that you believe you, or that you can see that you were helped without having to do anything for that help? Like, is there anything you could see? And then it's not like I need you to see privilege. I'm just asking you a question. And you know what? This is just your deal. You can see it. Let me tell you about my journey. And then I pass the microphone as some people start to say, here's what I can see, where they tell their journey. And never do I once tell you your journey. Here's how you're privileged. Here's how, because that's not how people learn. So when people get into self-reflection, they might say, well, here's how I wasn't privileged. I, grew up poor. I didn't have supportive parents. And so I'd say, that's important stuff. Why don't you write down 5 ways that you weren't privileged? And I just really want to authenticate those for you. Now, since you found 5 ways you weren't privileged and you worked pretty hard at that, what if you worked as hard with finding 5 ways you were privileged? And so I just continue to redirect their energy with no consequence. So you weren't supported and, you had to work your way through college. Since college, was there anyone in college that maybe, gave you a leg up or a foot up that helped you? Oh yeah, I had this one professor and I failed an exam once. He gave me a second chance. Like, this is awesome. Just a privilege is a second chance. And it's a privilege we can give others. I can give people a second chance, right? And so why don't you write that down? And then I go, if you've got 1, I know you got 2. And so what I'm doing is I'm keeping the ego safe. I'm not attacking the ego. It's all of our human condition. And I believe that if I'm coming at you with a need to make you see, I'm an ego. If I'm coming at you as I'll be a good companion while you look, I'm coming beyond ego. Does that make sense?
I love how you brought it in that the facilitator or lecturer, that their ego oftentimes also plays a role in this process.
Totally, because once I have a motive and I have expectations, I get judgy, and the ego judges. And when we get beyond the ego, we only help, right? The ego starts judging, like, I can't believe that you are, this idiotic. I can't believe that you don't see that your iPhone sitting right there is a privilege when, 25% of our nation doesn't even have access to the internet. Like, what we get into that, and we think it's our passion, and it's our ego. Because when I talk to people working in this space, if I really get down to their passion, it's not the anger of the ego or the need to make others see. It's the want to be more connected and present with many people. And if our approach is, I'm going to make you see, but my want is, I want to be more connected and present and collaborative in a bigger way, my ego behavior of trying to force you to see something is the opposite of what will get me what I want.
I love this. And, I know we're wrapping up here. So many more questions that I have, which is why it's so great that you have your podcast, No Ego, Cy Wakeman. That'll be linked up in the show notes. If you just YouTube Cy Wakeman, you can listen to hours of lectures while you're at work, reducing your input of drama. Instead of that, changing it to being a team member who's really bringing value and creating that place that everybody wants to go to work and that person people want to be around. So I think this is important too, because do you identify as a white person?
That is always a quandary for me
Okay.
because yeah, if I have boxes and there's only 8 of them and I have to pick the closest, I
Yeah.
identify as a white person. But when I did my DNA, 55% came back unidentifiable,
Huh.
which isn't that funny? Like I
Yeah.
paid $100, can't wait to find out what I am.
Ah,
Um,
refund.
yeah, and you know what's weird? And my husband kind of brags about this. When I went to get I had a tiny, tiny part in a movie, so you had to get an actor's guild card.
Yeah.
And so I go to get my card, and they want to know how to list you, in case you
Yeah.
become a star or something. And so the guy was all excited. He goes, "You know what?" He goes, "You got the best classification." And I go, "Well, what is it?" He goes, "It's ethnically neutral."
Yeah. Racially ambiguous.
Yeah, racially ambiguous. I'm like, that is cool. He's like, you could play a Jewish person, you could play somebody that's Latino, you could play like potentially somebody that, has some Asian heritage. And I'm like, that is cool. And he's like, that actually is a really cool thing. So, but I do identify as white. And I think if you looked at my life and you had to, put it in there, but spiritually, not to get too weird for your listeners, but I went to a retreat once and we had to pick a totem for ourselves, an
Mm,
animal totem. And you'll see behind me, I have all kinds of crows and stuff, ravens. And the group picked for me a raven. And they
mm,
said that that's someone who can shapeshift and fly between the worlds to
mm.
teach. And I took that really to heart, that I want to be more of a raven, um, that because I have entry into a lot of worlds, if I'm in New York, people invite me to Seder's. They just assume I'm Jewish. If you know, I get invited to a lot of different worlds because I'm a little fringy.
Mm.
And and so I want to make good use of that. My commitment is I'm going to try and make good use of that. And the best way I could tell your listeners to make use of it is really walk with the mantra, stop judging, start helping.
Mm.
Because a lot of us can have a discovery and then feel really egotistical about the discovery, like, well, I know not to call somebody that, but now you're judging others who do rather than helping.
Mm.
And so I just want to walk with a look at how can I help. And a lot of times the power of this work is not what you tell people, it's what you get people thinking about.
Yes. I
And what
mean,
you get them thinking about starts if they can feel safe. And so I'm really, I'm trying to do the work. I'm not going to lie, it's hard. But if I'm in a hotel room, I try and watch Fox News once in a while just to do the work,
get the
just
other perspective.
get the other perspective. And so yeah, for what it's worth, I probably identify as white, but I am privileged
Mm.
because of my ambiguity. I get to go a lot of places.
Well, two things on that, and then I know we'll wrap up here. Is one, I think it's important, that we as white people are having these conversations because racism really is kind of an our problem and our accountability. So I like how we came together and brought a lot
Totally.
of the drama research that you have, and I appreciate you applying it towards the diversity and inclusion space that we talk about at the celebration. I want to recommend that people go to YouTube and listen to Cy's South by Southwest lecture. And when you get to the part where Cy talks about going out to eat with friends and they had a no judgment conversation and the epiphany that you arrived at, I want y'all to listen to that. And when you get to that part, message me. I'd love to talk about it because I've been talking about it with anybody who will listen. I love the epiphany y'all arrive at on there.
I love that. And I would love to ask your listeners as well. I know that you probably saw some blindside things I need to know more about.
Mm.
And so I'm open, like seriously, we met through a DM on Instagram, but seriously, teach me. Teach me
Mm.
because, yeah, I was raised in a town of 800 people, and we had one person that had any color. And of course, he was the foster kid, right? So,
Mm.
I mean, talk about like zero exposure.
Mhm.
So, my commitment is it's not to know everything I can't possibly, but it's to be open to all the possibilities and the ways we can come together. And I think it's so true that There's so many things going on that we who identify as white are fearful to talk about because we're going to mess it up and it's going to be sloppy. And we have done incredibly horrible things, and we got systems that do suck, but we can't shy away from the sloppy talk. We can't shy away from it.
And I love your sign off. I agree. I'm from a town of 4,000 people, a little bit bigger than yours, in Wisconsin. So
love it.
So same thing here. It's we're always learning. I want to get you on time to your meeting, but I always ask our guests 2 questions before we sign off. So maybe just quick answers on them. It's my year of courage, and so my goal is to have everyday conversations with people about courage that are other than I one time ran into a burning building and saved somebody, which is courage. But what for you is everyday courage?
For a long time, I felt really proud because I have a lot of courage. I'm kind of a risk taker. And now what I'm finding out is everyday courage is stillness and quietness in those moments where I want to jump in, control, move away from just the ability to sit and experience things that are less than comfortable. Is now my everyday courage. It doesn't look very courageous, but there's just a lot of times where I'm gonna lean into something that is unfamiliar to me or something that scares me and not say anything, just experience and learn about me.
I love it. And where should folks hit you up? What's your social? Where can they get your book besides posting they're free?
Yeah, exactly. Post. You get a free book. I'm out there at Cy Wakeman, CYWAKMAN, and we also have a company called Rally Based Leadership, and so RB Leaders on Instagram, and of course our website. But we love engagement on social media, and like I said, we try and give everything we got away. We work with Gary Vaynerchuk's team, our video team, and so we try and just keep content coming for you.
And you do it well. So
thank you.
Folks who are on the go, folks who are driving, weren't able to write all that down. TomMerrill.com/Cy, CY, TomMerrill.com/Cy, CY. All of that's written down for your convenience. Cy, I want to thank you. I want to affirm you and appreciate not only the work you're doing in the world, in communities, but also for really just taking a chance. Like you said, I just direct messaged you on Instagram after seeing you on Gary's show and was like, I got to talk to this person. And you took a chance on me, and I really appreciate that. It means so much to me and to the folks listening. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think life rewards the brave, and I want to reward the brave well. So a DM, ask for what you need, it gets rewarded.
So I'd like to give you the last word. What would you like to invite folks to think about, do, reflect, be, hear? What's your invitation to the celebration audience?
My invitation is to stop believing everything you think. I would tune into your thoughts and question everything. I think it will be some great discoveries.
Well said. So thank you once again, Cy. I want to thank you for listening to this week's Deeper Listening, Re-Listening series. I don't know how many more times I can squeeze in the word listening into this sentence. Want to thank you, as I shared in the beginning, for sharing your time and energy listening to this entire episode. As I said at the beginning, I'd love to know, do you know what year this episode was recorded in? And I'd love to know what stuck out to you, what moved you, what questions do you have? And if you have any suggestions for what you'd like future topics to cover or future guests we should feature. My friends, I look forward to you joining us again next week for a new episode in our Re-Listen series. And as always, I'm wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at TomEarl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.